Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn unto him, or turn to him the other also. And if a man will sue thee at the law, and take thy cloak, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee turn not thou away. Ye have heard that it has been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor, but hate thy enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. And that's Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 down through about verse 40 there, or 46, excuse me, there. Well, good morning, and I am your pastor, Raymond Steinkamp, from Dames Ferry Baptist Church, and I'm come to you this drizzly morning, Wednesday. It is actually, June the 10th, I believe it is, 2020. I do want to announce that we are doing our Sunday morning service at 11 a.m. We had a good service last Sunday. It was good to be in the house of the Lord again to worship, and we invite you to come and join us at 11 a.m. We want to remind you to practice your social distancing, no hugging, no shaking hands, try to stay 6 feet apart. We have some of the pews marked off so that we can stay far away from one another and not spread this COVID virus. But still have our worship service. So I invite you to come out. We will try to get our Wednesday nights started up again come in July, maybe after the 4th. Let the holiday get by and we'll try to get started up again and start some of our business meetings and other things. Do remember, if you're not able to attend, you can always send in your tithes and offerings. Just mail them to our treasurer. If you don't have her address, give me a call or give her a call. We'll get you an address to send it to so that the church can stay afloat and continue on serving the Lord. And want to kind of jump on into what we're going to talk about this morning. And it's going to be one of those controversial issues. It's one that seems that many people have a lot of different opinions about. It's one that I've waited a while to speak on because wanting to gather all the information that I can and the evidences that you see, just make sure that we're presenting it in a proper way. I've even heard some of the speakers that I like to listen to on YouTube say some things that I just simply can't agree with concerning this issue. And it is the issue of racism, and it is about the George Floyd controversies where we've seen all the rioting and the protests and things such as that. And as a pastor, it is my job to speak on it, and I'm not intending on angering anybody, and my intention is not to spread any kind of hate or anything of such, but just to give us kind of some logic in this. And as Christians, I always say that we should be the voice of reason in this chaotic world. We ought to be light in darkness. And let me say from the onset that racism, true racism, that's what I want to call it, true racism, is abominable to God. It is a horrific sin. It is a terrible thing. But we have today what is perceived as racism that is not always racism. And yes, there is unfairness and unjustness that happens to all different people in this world. And I like what Vodi Balcom says about this. He says there's only one race, and that is the human race. So let's get that straight from the start. There's only one race, the human race. Even the Apostle Paul told us in Acts chapter 17 that God has made us all of one blood. We all come from one descendant. So we're all brothers and sisters in humanity here. So we need to keep this in mind as we go through this and as we talk about this. But we do want to bring some logic and some level-headedness to this. And yes, we do have problems in America. That's what our government is here for us to influence our government, to make laws and try to change some of the things that we can fix some of these problems. And that's why the church is supposed to have such a voice in all of this and help to guide the people and guide our leaders. We're not to make laws because the government is the sphere that God has given us to protect us and to execute judgment and justice as it should. But the church is here to help to lead us in righteousness, and that's what we ought to be doing today. And so often that we find that we're not doing this. So let's kind of start addressing some of this. First of all, we have to deal with this idea of true racism and a perceived racism today. True racism is a sin. It is wicked, and it comes from the heart of man. And let me just tell you to begin with, you will never eradicate it in this world. It's never going to happen because it proceeds from the heart of man. It is part of that sinful nature that comes out in horrific ways, terrible things. We see terrible acts of injustice back during the Civil War and prior to that, and even after that during the civil rights. And yes, people of color in America have had to fight for rights in America. Sometimes they went about it the right way, sometimes they went about it the wrong way, and we've made great strides and great changes over time, but things have gone to a way that is just it's just wrong, and we need to address that. So that's when we start talking about a perceived racism, because today anybody that suffers any kind of inequity or maybe even injustice is automatically racism. If you say things such as people who come to this nation illegally have no right to be here, all of a sudden you're racist against a group of people. And they should come here legally through the laws that we have set forth, and not everybody gets to come to America. It's a privilege to live here in America. Those that are born here in America ought to realize that it's a privilege to be here. And we're the ones that have the rights to be here because we were born here in this nation and we live under the laws of this nation. And of course, a nation without borders is no longer a nation. But nevertheless, people think about this anytime any disparages comes in where you don't get what someone else gets there. Someone else has a better outcome in something than you did is automatically racism. And one of the things that I hear most often about it is someone's making more money than what I'm making. But the truth about it is yes, there are some things that need to be fair about this, especially if you're working alongside of someone who's doing the exact same job you are and your performance is the same. Yes, you should be making close to the same amount of money. It's unfair not to. But you take people who have gone through the effort to get an education or to learn a skill or craft or good at something, and then you take someone who's not applied themselves, who's not tried, who didn't take that same path, who chose a different path for their life there, and they're all upset because they're not making the same exact money. I've heard many that lacked the education, didn't even have a high school diploma, and was just all upset because someone else was making more money than they were that had a college degree and had much larger responsibility, had to know a whole lot more, and yet they were arguing that they should be making the exact same money. And you see, the perceived racism in this is that a person that didn't apply themselves didn't have the same outcome as someone who did apply themselves and further themselves, and so they automatically perceive that it is a racism. Just like when you see the Black Lives Matter. What is the big resistance about the Black Lives Matter? Because what one commentator said, and I won't name their name because I don't want myself to be tied to them in this, because someone may take this video the wrong way and something and be ready to counsel in the cancel culture there and try to get you kicked off of YouTube or something. But nevertheless, he kind of put it this way about those disparages or about the Black Lives Matter thing there is that there's this idea that when someone says Black Lives Matter, that on the opposing side there, that there's this group of people out there saying that Black lives don't matter. And I haven't heard that from anyone there. Even people I know that say things that would be perceived as racist, they never say that. They even look at what happened with George Floyd and they say that was wrong. That was unjust. That was way too far. The police went too far in that. And that it should not be done. So be sure when you're talking about racism, you're talking about true racism and not talking about a perceived racism in this. Even white people today are talking about racism in this. And there is an actual push here where you have the perceived racism on one side that actually justifies racism against another side there. It says it's okay because we perceive the racism against ourselves. And that is just not the way we should live. And especially as Christians today. And that's who I'm really talking to, Christians. If you're not a Christian, guess what? I hate to tell you that there's not a secular answer to the problems we have today. There's only a godly answer. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on there. But let's bring some logic into some of this when we're dealing with this issue of George Floyd. And I do want to remind you that, as I've said, that racism is wrong in any shape, form, or fashion. Yes, things went too far with that, and yes, there's some justice that needs to be taken care of there in the George Floyd case there. But we need to start taking some things into perspective here about the George Floyd case. I'm so shocked that people are so willing to take him on as the martyr to project forth to say, hey, these lives are being taken from us, and this is an upstanding good guy here that was done wrong by the police, and that's just simply not the true narrative. And always remember, the press is always spinning a narrative here, and in this they're wanting ratings, they're wanting you to watch, as well as they're promoting a viewpoint, a political viewpoint on top of that, because they want to stack the deck in their favor. And they also want it where they get the political people they want elected there, just like the political people that are involved in this. And this is what is so messed up about this. You get all over Donald Trump about not wearing his mask because of the COVID virus, but then we have this big funeral, and the former vice president, Joe Biden, goes to a funeral, a mass funeral with all of these people with this and all, because he's doing it for photo ops and to get himself out there so that he'll get more support for voters to hope to win the presidency and all. He's doing worse than Donald Trump ever did in this and putting himself in this. But let's talk about George Floyd here. Is he the guy that they ought to put up as the guy for to be their martyr, to be the one that should be the face of fighting back against this fascism and things such as this? Well, since George Floyd has had a conviction of not only cocaine use and violence, and even spent time in prison there for holding up a pregnant woman, now armed robbery of a pregnant woman, putting a gun to her belly as she is pregnant there and all. Spent time in prison for that, as well as he was high on meth at the time, as well as he was COVID-19 positive. And I know you say, well, now what does all this have to do with what took place in that video? Now remember, he was saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Well, what is part of one of the symptoms of COVID-19? It is the shortness of breath there. And he's put in a stress situation there, elevated everything, heart rate, all of that, being sick at the time, high on meth, and all. And then, of course, what happened with the police officer there, and I know you say, now wait a minute, hold on, they determined that it was homicide, that the coroner said it was homicide, the autopsy and everything. Let me tell you, you don't think that was somewhat politically motivated? You don't think there was some pressure on that to make that be what it is? And but nevertheless, you have this person being their basically spokesman, even though he's dead, and this and all. But they want to put him up as their picture there of the one that this person was martyred there. And we start looking at this and saying, what? This doesn't make sense. There's no way. There are white people that are shot and killed who are unarmed. There are actually more, from what I understand, this year have been shot and killed that were white who were unarmed, and you don't hear anything about it here and all. And actually, there's more police officers been shot and killed this year than unarmed black and white people combined there and all. So we have to think about all these things and put them into some kind of perspective here and all. And, I do believe that the police officers went too far in this, but this has become the big issue here, and if you don't think the press is spinning you a narrative, you need to rethink this, because in this there were 4 police officers involved. One was white, who held down Floyd and had his knee on his neck, and yes, he went too far, and he should be held accountable. But then there was an Asian and a Hispanic as well in this, and I can't remember the ethnicity of the other one in this. But here, all of a sudden, it becomes a black on white thing, a racist thing here and all, when, wait a minute, there's all different kind of ethnicities involved in all this. And then you charge all of the officers, all of them, with this second or third degree murder, and now I think it's moved to second degree murder, which is all politically motivated in this. Now, yes, the officers should have been held accountable. Yes, it was manslaughter. And yes, the white officer is guilty of that. And yes, he should be prosecuted, I do believe, for that. At least the least of that for that right there. Because what he did was over the top there. But the other officers may have been holding back people. I didn't see the whole video, the entire thing there. I don't know if they'll actually let you see the whole video in it and all, but nevertheless, you don't know what the other officers were doing. They may have been doing crowd control. They may have been trying to keep people back and protect the officers, because you have to do that these days. They may have been on the lookout for someone trying to kill them. So, they should be disciplined, maybe even terminated. But second degree murder in all of this, I mean, it's just outrageous. It's similar to the case of what we have here in Georgia, in Brunswick there and all. The men acted wrong when they confronted a man who was jogging, and they shot and killed him after they had a confrontation there in that and all. But they made it out to be racist in the press, even though they had no evidence of that. And then all of a sudden they arrested the guy who filmed this. Now, they arrested him for murder. I mean, he didn't have anything to do with it other than filming it. And how are you going to intervene with somebody with a gun and all? How are you going to put a stop to that? But nevertheless, they arrest this guy, and I'm thinking, to save his own neck there and all, he's saying, well, I saw the guy stand over the other guy's body there and start talking racial slurs and all. What do you really think's going on there and all? He's trying to save his own neck at all of this. I think it's made up. I think that is part of it is fabricated, because that didn't come out till weeks and weeks later after all of this. So, and yes, I do believe there's spin put on it. I believe there's a narrative put on it. But we see these cases, and you notice that you only hear about the cases where a white cop kills a black person. And that's all you ever hear about. Many of the confrontations that you look at on video, you watch them, what you actually see is the people being very confrontational and resistant to the police officers there, and fighting against them and all. But now, we've said all of this stuff here and all, and you may not agree. You may say, I think you're a racist because you don't agree with me. And that's a perceived racist and not a true racism there and all. And then, of course, you have to deal with what is a perceived systemic racism, which, again, is where people just don't apply themselves. They don't try to do any better. And yes, their environment does influence them. But, if we were such good and righteous and holy people, all these challenges that we have, instead of them making us worse, they would make us better. Instead of sitting here saying, I grew up in poverty and this is all I've ever known, and I run with the people that I run with because, it's just all I've ever known. If we were actually good people, what we would do is rise above that. What we would do is get ourselves educated. What we would do is take advantage of all the resources given to us, and we would get out of all of that. I do like what I hear Ben Shapiro say a lot of times. What are the major causes of poverty today? And he says there's 3 major causes of poverty today. One is lack of education. He says here, he says, get a high school diploma. Point blank period. Get a high school diploma. Just make it that easy. Get an education there. You can go to college, and you can get the student loans, and you can go to college, and you can better yourself in this. But get a high school diploma. Secondly, don't have babies out of marriage. Just it takes a two income home to provide for children, and it takes 2 parents. It takes a mother and a father, and the children need both of them and all. But then the last and final, and you would think this would just go without saying, he says, go to work, get a job. Go to work. You know, most people will work themselves above the poverty level just about in any job they have if they get up and they go to work. If they go out here and they try, they apply themselves, they will get out of poverty. Doesn't mean they're going to be rich, but it means they're going to get out of poverty. See, the perceived systematic racism today is if I don't make it to be a success, I don't become a millionaire in everything that, you know, in my employment and in my career and all, somebody was racist against me. It's somebody else's fault. Somebody else did this, no matter what I did. And you can do all the right things, and guess what? You still may not wind up rich. You still might not wind up a success there. Most millionaires and even billionaires that start out poor or start out mediocre wind up going bankrupt 3 to 5 times before they become a millionaire. I mean, even Donald Trump has been bankrupt several times before he become a billionaire. So we have to think about these things and put these things in some kind of perspective. And guess what? It's still all up to the sovereignty of God. You can do all the right things there, and things still not work out like you think they ought to. And it doesn't mean the system is rigged against you. Now, there are always adjustments that can be made and fixes that can be done to make things where people have more opportunity. But it still comes down to the fact, if you don't go to work, you're not going to have any money. And I want to segue from that right on into what do we do about all this. As I said earlier, secularism has no answer for all of this. They have no solution to this problem here. They can't fix it. Their idea is to eradicate racism, which is an impossibility because it comes from the human heart. It is evil and wickedness that comes from the human heart. And yes, our nation was founded on the idea of not only freedom of religion, but the land of opportunity. But people understood that they had to come and they had to come and they had to work there. Now, as far as the protesting goes, what can you say about that? That is a right that we have. I wish we as Christians would take advantage of the protesting more and more ourselves there. We ought to be involved. If we want to protest the true injustice and true racism, we ought to be protesting the abortion clinics, because the abortion clinics, they kill more black men and women than any entity in America. You can take them all and combine them, and Planned Parenthood kills more black babies than anyone else there. And it just shows you how they target that. I mean, it's been proven that they go to neighborhoods that are majority of a color, and they put their signs up and advertise about that and how you can get these things done for free there. They are eradicating. I mean, you think about all the abortions that take place. If they did not abort those babies, how much greater that population would be. I mean, it's just something you need to think about in all of this. If you want to talk about systemic racism here and all, that's part of what Planned Parenthood is all about in this. But, you know, you have that, but the thing comes in is what the Bible teaches us. What did I just read there from the Bible there and all? We're to love our enemies and not hate them. It's not an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. In the Old Testament, when that was put forth there, it was not put forth there as a requisite of what you can do. It was actually put there on a limitation of retribution there and all. Only an eye for an eye and only a tooth for a tooth. And my thing is the police officers have been arrested in this George Floyd case here. Even the case here in Georgia here, the 2 men were arrested for the vigilantism there and all. They're going to go to trial. They're going to be tried. They're going to go to prison. What more do you want? What more do you want out of this? Justice is being served here and all. What more do you want out of this? Yes, I can understand protest. Yes, I can understand to say, hey, maybe there are situations that could be handled different. Maybe the police officers need more training. Maybe they need more backup. Maybe they need more resources there. Things such as that in this. But what more do you want? And what do you think you're going to accomplish by rioting? I mean, what did CVS ever do to you? What did Target do to you? What did these small businesses ever do to you? And this is what's always just dumbfounded me about the rioting and the looting and all. Even back in the 90s when we had this go on with the Rodney King incident and all in this, You know, what did the people do? I'm mad at the police officers. I'm mad at the government. I'm mad at the world. So I'm going to go burn my house down. I'm going to go burn my neighborhood down. I'm going to go burn stores down where people go and make a living there. You know? I'm going to burn all of that down because I'm mad. That's just criminal. That's the same. That's almost equal to the racism there. There's so much foolishness and all that. You're just thinking about yourself, number one. Number two, it is a criminal act there. It is a criminal act. So what is the solution to all of this? What should we do as Christians there? Well, we need, first of all, to learn to turn the other cheek. Learn how to live as Christ lived. Christ could have killed all those Roman soldiers before they crucified him, but no, he laid down his life for others, for us. He did that. That's what we ought to be doing. You know, Martin Luther King, one of the great activists of the 60s there that was assassinated, you know, I love what he said about it. You don't overcome darkness with darkness. You overcome darkness with light. You don't overcome evil with evil. You overcome evil with righteousness. You know, I wish the black leaders would start teaching in their churches there and all. If you're going to be truly an upright and good person, don't go riot. Don't go loot. Protesting is something totally different, and that's fully justifiable there and all. But don't go get involved with these groups that hate people, that promote racism themselves, just like Black Lives Matter and Antifa or Antifa and things such as that. What should we do? You know, my thing would be to tell people to go get an education. Go get an education. You have no excuse. You can get the student loans, and yes, you'll have to pay those loans back. And all, it's not just a free education, but you can make a success out of yourself. Prove everybody wrong. Prove all the races wrong. That you're not a lower class of people. That you're not just uneducated. That you're not just people who can do no better, who can not rise above their struggles and challenges in life there. Overcome the darkness with light. That doesn't mean roll over and be abused. It doesn't mean when there are acts of true racism or acts of injustice against individuals that it doesn't need to be addressed, because it does. It needs to be dealt with, just like this situation with George Floyd. It needs to be addressed. The man did not deserve to die as he did die there. He has basic human rights, even in custody of the police there. Even though he was breaking the law, he did submit to them, and they had no right to put their knee across his neck and hold it there for so long. But you have to understand that there are others who been arrested and want to fight with the police, and that's the first thing they holler, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And they're just fooling with the cops. They're trying any way they can to get away from the cops or get the upper hand, get their gun and shoot them. You know, and it's a very bad situation. But what's going to come out of all of this before it's over with, if things don't change and go the right way, is police officers are going to refuse to go into high crime areas or high risk situations there. The crime is going to happen and the police are not going to come, because they're going to be afraid that when they do come, if things go south, that their lives are going to be ruined. They're going to go to prison, or you're not going to be able to get people to be police officers. And then listen to what the news is doing, and even the Democrats are doing. The socialists, the communists, what they're doing, want to defund the police department. How can you do that? How can we not have the people that keep law and order? And just because one or two or a few cops do things that are wrong doesn't mean they're all bad. And if you don't believe in this cancel culture, I read today on Facebook from a reputable news source there that Paramount Picture or Paramount Channel has canceled Cops and PD Live, and they have just simply canceled them straight out. You know what I would say about it? Quit watching that channel. I think everybody should quit watching it. You ought to call your subscriber and say, I want that channel taken off. I don't want no part of it. I don't want any money going to that, because it is wrong. And yes, we need to address these isolated incidences of injustices and maybe even racism. But to say this systemic racism, I can't buy that. I can't go with that. It's just not so. And yet there is systemic racism, but it's going against a different race of people just because of the color of their skin and they were born at, and a perceived advantage that they have, which they do not have, because there are other races here in America, I should say other ethnicities in America, who do much better, who are targeted. Do you realize realize Jews are targeted more than any other people in America for racial acts and acts of violence there and all? But the reason it's not reported is the reason that they don't have to go out and riot in the streets and other things is because they have a tendency to be more educated and to be more well off and family oriented. It's just like it is with the Asian people today, as well as it is with other people's groups in this, even with the whites today. I mean, that's the thing. But what is the solution to this? Christ is the only solution. Until we get back to being a truly Christian nation, will we see some solutions to some of this, because the only cure for the evil that's in the human heart is the righteousness of Christ. And my challenge is to everybody, no matter what color your skin is, we're all of one race here. We're all the same here on the inside. We all need Jesus, and I would say that we need to learn to live righteously. Any of you don't tolerate a criminal element around you or in your culture and all. Don't hate the police. Hate the acts of evil that we see. Don't hate everybody of a different color just because they're a different color. Hate the acts of injustices that you see. And yes, we should fight against them. Not with bare knuckles, but with the spiritual weapons that we have been given by God there. Remember what Paul said? We war not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places. That is the ones that we battle against. Well, I hope you found this to be helpful, enlightening. It is not meant to provoke anyone to anger. It is not meant to be some kind of platform where I solve all the world's problems and all the United States problems there. Don't send me death threats. Don't vandalize our church. Come and worship. Come and be a part and see the love that we have for the Lord, the love that we have for you. And if you're not a Christian today, I encourage you, surrender yourself to Jesus. Surrender Him. Have your mind renewed. That's the cure for our hearts and our minds and our problems that we have, is Christ and Him alone. God bless you.